Welcome to Diversity Conversations, where we engage in thought-provoking dialogue to identify leadership solutions to today's most challenging conflicts. Streamed live each week, Saturday 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Hosted by Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategist and CEOs Eric Ellis and Tommy Lewis. Join us and add your voice to this engaging diversity conversation.
Good morning, Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, the United States, and the world. My name is Eric Ellis. I'm the president and CEO of Integrity Development Corporation, and I'm joined by my good friend and brother,
Tommy Lewis, president and CEO of Make It Plain Consulting. Good morning, Eric Ellis.
Tommy Lewis, Coach Tommy Lewis is alive. He's back. His fans have been missing him. Brother, how are you, man?
Eric, I am ecstatic for a number of reasons. One, our baseball team continued over the last couple of weeks doing what I've asked them to do, and that's simply get better every day.
Okay.
Work hard during practice, have fun, and do well in games, right? Getting better. And it showed up, Eric. We had one of the most exciting season finales, regular season, that I've seen in a long time.
Okay.
My young boys showed grit, being able to stick to the mission, be true to themselves, not get overly emotionally hijacked. Our fans were very, very supportive. And our opposing team, how should I say it? They were not as hospitable as one would like at this age.
Okay.
I'm going to leave it there.
Right.
And so, and when I say not hospitable, not only just being opponents, and you know how fans are,
Right.
but some of my parents, after the game, after we beat their behind, came to me and shared with me some of the colorful names that they were throwing my way without me hearing. And so, Eric, this is nothing new to me. Right.
Did you have any business cards with you? You know what? I appreciate the comment.
I appreciate the comment. Hey, here's my card. Let's have a diversity conversation. Right? And so this work never ends. It's in life, it's in play, it's at work. And so on the baseball front, we were victorious a number of times throughout the course of the week. And then also personally, just really enjoying life, Eric. The work has been stressful, but I've been able to create a more balanced work-life situation, right? And so I'm happy. I'm very, very happy about that. And I'm most happy to be talking with you and the Diversity Conversations community. So good morning.
We are grateful to have you back, Tommy. It's been a great week for us as well. As you can see, I'm in a different location. I'm in the ATL in Atlanta, Georgia. Just my family and I came here, man, to attend the graduation of one of my youngest nephews, Cameron Ellis, my brother Duke Ellis's youngest son, man. He had a graduation yesterday, and we're just having a blast here, man. So that's just beautiful. My wife and I are here. It's been different traveling again. You know, it's been so long since we've been in airplanes, man. In airports, feeling to some extent that things are opening up. We're getting back to some sense of normalcy, you know, and that's a good feeling. Although wearing a mask the whole way through the airports is not something that we generally love. But as I look at this last week, Tommy, in many ways, it feels like we're coming out of a great hibernation.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's sort of spring cleaning 3.0.
Yeah.
It really is on steroids, man. We've been, new carpet in the master bedroom, painting, just doing all kinds of things because it feels like there's a new lease on life. And so we're grateful, man. This is the pre-cicada week or two, I guess, because you're in Cincinnati. Are they hitting yet? You see cicadas?
Yeah, they're sporadic, but they're coming. You know, got a few poking their heads out of the ground and climbing up the bark of the tree, but they're coming, my friend.
Well, I've got a tip for anybody out there that's listening this morning. The last time the cicadas came out, Tommy, I saw my kids were in retreat mode. I said, no, no, no. We don't retreat from the cicadas. Right. Get yourself a badminton or a tennis racket and go on the offensive. I mean, they're blind, they can't see. Now, apologies to all of those that are big insect people. I apologize. We want to be sensitive to everything, except the cicadas.
Right. Indeed, man. There are billions of them. Right? And interesting enough is, in all due respect to, again, those who are in love with insects and or cicadas, not making mockery here. However, with the cicadas, we know that they hibernate, if you will, for about 17 years.
Right.
Then they surface for one objective.
Right.
Throw a part. Yep. And then they die.
Right.
So why are there so many? Right. Here's the reason.
Okay.
Because if you notice, when the cicadas are come unearthed, they swarm. They swarm to protect themselves as a species, right? So they know that they have predators, birds and squirrels and dogs and anything else out there that wants some protein.
Right.
And what happens is there's just like any other animal that swarms. That swarm, when the predators eat them or attack them, they know they're not all going to survive. But those that do survive are enough to reproduce the next generation.
Okay.
So, in other words, if you have your tennis racket and you bat a few, it's all good. They'll be back in another 17 years. Because we're not complaining with the birds that are eating them and all that. Yeah, Eric, get your tennis racket out, right? And get your fly swatter, your cicada swatter, and get them off of your back. Because they're hanging on.
Because they're hanging on for dear life. They can't see good. So they're out here running into you, shocking your system. You're already trying to recover from one pandemic. Now you're being hit by the cicadas. And they said the dogs can eat a few, but just make sure they don't eat too many of them, because then they get sick and all like that. But yeah, hey man, we're excited about that. And this last week, a lot of the great new things happening in business. I had a number of focus groups this week, Tommy. That's always an interesting process, man. To talk to people after you've done a sort of a digital survey of the perceptions that people have of inclusion, belonging, their voice, perceptions of fairness and equity. Now you get a chance to talk to people and probe a little more deeply around that, and you learn some things. And then it's interesting to see when you're in there with leaders that sometimes it's a little difficult to allow people to be open and honest, So that's been an interesting process, man. But loving that, and we're finishing up some development on some asynchronous training that we're going to be providing online, man. So that process has been exciting for our team, man. Working with digital platforms and things like that. So great week.
Yeah, I appreciate this, Eric. You trigger my thinking. I know we have some topics we want to discuss about today. I'm in a little bit of a quandary. Want your reaction, maybe even the community's reaction. For a number of years, our organization has been doing climate assessments or culture assessments. And those cultural assessments consist of, individual interviews, maybe even focus groups. We collect some data, right? And then we also deploy electronic surveys that are both confidential and anonymous. The interviews, especially when they're one-to-one, they are, we don't have a lot of questions, right? We have a standard like 10 questions. We can always offer up follow-up questions. We have a particular client who we have worked with before, and it's a large client, so they have different divisions. And obviously all divisions don't talk to each other because it's a large client. Right? And there's a need. There was a need and a request for us to do a climate assessment for 6 people, right?
Okay.
And so I was taken aback.
Right.
That's not really a climate assessment.
Right.
6 people.
Right.
And then the client asked for the questions that we will be asking during the one-to-one interviews.
Mm.
And I got that request and I pondered for a moment, and then I socialized it with my team. And my team, they raised a brow, right? If it's only 6 people, and our thoughts were who's going to receive these questions before we have the interview? Because this is an anonymous, confidential, and objective review. What are your thoughts, Eric, about clients who are wanting to control the process of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And that process may be strategy or focus groups or assessments or even controlling the outcome. In other words, there may be a person that they want out and they're wanting this third-party objective view to help support their argument to get the person out. What are your thoughts about a client or an individual trying to control the outcome or even the process?
Wow, wow, wow. I guess we are in the same line of business.
Yes, sir.
Because I've experienced something like that as well. So first of all, I'm trying to determine what kind of integrity you have around this process. I think before that, let me just speak real honestly, that I think that you and I are not in the business of trying to turn away business. So we're not trying to just get rid of clients. But I think that we are trying to assess if there's enough character there for us to, to be able to serve them effectively. So I've had clients that tried to do that too this last week. And I met with a couple of people and I said, before I take the contract, I want to meet with these people that you're challenged with to get their perspective. And so then I went back to the client and shared some things that they didn't want to hear. And then they wanted me to talk to somebody else to sort of speak badly about one of the people that I had met. And I was like, but I'll tell you, Tommy, so in that case, what I may do is meet with the people, the interviews, and then ask them first question, are you comfortable having this conversation? And I would say to them, are there things that you want the organization to know? So I would play it almost as though it's not anonymous. And I would play it almost that everything you're saying could be reported back. Microphone. You get a chance to say something or nothing. So that's part of the way I would think about it, man, because 6 people is too small anyway. It's hard to keep that anonymous. If they know 3 of them love them, 2 of them on the fence, they already are going to using you and your independence to pick the pockets of their people. So it's like, hey, big print, not small print. Don't try this at home. Everybody could be listening. So I really would, because I think that you have a responsibility both to the organization and to the members. What did the organization say to you was their interest around this climate assessment?
Well, their interest was that there's an employee who has been filing complaints, and these are both gender-related kind of discriminatory complaints as well as racial. And this particular employee, quote unquote, disgruntled employee, is the only employee of color and only female employee of color within the entire division. And this is one department of 6, right? And over 2 years, this employee has been filing with HR, filing with EEOC, filing with the NAACP, and filing with an external attorney. After sharing all that, they did not share with me, after I asked, the true rationale of having a climate assessment of only 6 interviews. Right? And I've already requested the other empirical data, like what were the outcomes of these other filings? Those are complaints. There are investigations. There are outcomes. I haven't received those yet. It's been 3 weeks.
Wow.
Right? And so where I am now is as early as this morning, my contact reached out to me and was asking that, over the last 3 days, they hadn't heard from me, right? Because I received a request and I socialized it with my team, and one of my team members is an attorney, right? And we haven't begun to work. Right. My attorney was on yesterday responded like, there's a risk in integrity.
Right.
That's what they're saying. So that the client is already asked to rearrange the questions that I did send them, to take some questions out of the one-on-one interviews and put them into the survey. And I'm thinking, along with my attorney, saying, no, there's a process there's a procedure. And why we ask certain questions face to face, why we ask certain questions electronically, and why we ask the same question in different platforms. Why? Because we will get different answers. Right. And we do the analytics. So the short answer is, at this point, I don't know what the objectives are. Yeah. Right. And that's a telltale sign. Yeah. And so I'll close with this, Eric. This is why it's a telltale sign for me. I trust my gut. I trust my gut. I trust my gut in my personal relationships, right? And sometimes that's gotten me in trouble. My gut is always with love. I trust people. I love them. They have goodwill. Sometimes that's gotten me in trouble. I trust my intellect, my experience, my wisdom. So I trust that I've done this before. I know how things go, and I know how relationships can start good or they can start rocky. This is an event where my antennas are up. My gut is twisting with butterflies because I'm still counting 6 people. Yeah. Yep. Right. 6 people. And the integrity of confidentiality is almost non-existent, right? Because 5 people are on board and 1 is not. That's a lack of integrity. Yeah.
I'll tell you, Tommy, it's unfortunate. I'll repeat this. I'm going to sound like a broken record one of these Saturday mornings. But Gallup's research in 2017, full-time workers around the globe, 85% of people don't like their job, 75% don't like their bosses. Yep. I'm going to say, Tommy, that companies have got to do a better job of creating people-centered workplaces where they truly, truly, truly care about people. Now, I'll tell you that people are difficult. I get it. People don't come every day with loving kindness and all on board trying to do all the wonderful right things. But leaders still have to lead in integrity-centered ways as well, Tommy. And I think that sometimes we're not seeing that in operation. And you and I cannot necessarily, we can't be a party to that. And I know, Tommy, you can remember back to times where your business was struggling, where you needed that business. And yet, if it didn't feel right, if it didn't seem like there was, a real legitimate objective behind what a company is wanting to do, you can't allow yourself to be sort of a collaborator, a co-facilitator for dysfunctional leadership. Yeah, that's just unfortunate, man. Like I said, I saw the same thing. I've attached my own self to what they will do with employees. In other words, if you don't do the right thing there, then I'm attached to that.
Yeah.
So I won't be able to continue. That's a hard statement to say. It's one I just said. I said, look, there are a lot of other consulting firms. I'm certain that, people will jump all over trying to work with you. But as for us, we want to do what's in your best interest and in the best interest of your people. I'll tell you, Tommy, and we just have to hold to that, man, because it's just not right. These people are sometimes, and I'll tell you, Tommy, people are going through a lot of stuff. We're going to talk about COVID-19. I think a lot of stress is still lingering, man. And
Yes.
people not understanding how to deal with all of that at leadership levels or at employee levels, man. And some people are making some statements. I'm just not taking it anymore. Like I came through the pandemic and I realized that I don't have to keep taking this.
Yeah.
And so then the company may try to take actions against them. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. Appreciate you receiving that concern.
Yeah.
This is a conversation that I've wanted to have, not only with you, but with the community, and not to get in the weeds, right? Not to get in the weeds. I think is transferable, not only at work, but also at life. Like you said, stress, right? What's the motives behind people?
Right.
And I struggle with that, Eric, because I personally have goodwill, right? My motives are innately good because I'm always under stress and I don't have time for one more piece of stress, especially stress that I create for myself. I don't want that.
Right.
I don't want to walk into creating problems.
Right.
So when I'm asking these questions, I'm like, man, I didn't create this issue. I need help getting out because I would not have.
Right.
I would not have. Yeah.
And I'll say, here's what it is, Tommy. Let me just break this down and bring it right into where all of us live. A lot of this is sometimes about blind spots. It's about leadership blind spots. And so in every organization that exists on the earth, there are going to be leaders that do things well and that don't do things as well. All of us are going to have these moments, Tommy, where we're doing the right thing and we're missing the mark. So when I see confusion happening in my organization between my team members, the first thing I do, I start reflecting. What have I done that's contributed to that? If I see them being a little off, then I'll think about my own style and some of the shortcomings in my style that can create that. So the first place I try to look, Tommy, is not at them, but really at myself, because I think that's what leaders have to try to do within organizations. And what happens, Tommy, is that we can be blinded sometimes by thinking because I'm a good person and I generally want to do the right thing, that anybody that would have a problem with that, it's on them. But I'd say that that's not a great leadership perspective. I want to start with myself and say, are there things that I've done? I sent the text to somebody, said, you know what? I know one of the things that I do is I'll ask somebody to start something. They'll kind of be working on it. I'm not really zeroing in on all the detail that I've given them. They've done some things, but then in the meantime, I spent time. And if they don't get back to me a couple of times, now I've spent time and I've advanced the ball. And maybe I even worked with somebody else. Now all the work that they were doing, some of it's obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
I got to own that. That if there's some frustration that they have, I got to own that because of the way that I operated, man. And so I really do. And you know what? What I'm finding is grace that's coming back from my team. I'm also seeing in them an understanding sometimes. And sometimes, well, thank you for the apology because I wasn't happy, and so Tommy, that's what we have to be able to do. If you and I keep practicing our own integrity with our own leadership style, I think that it sort of gives us more credibility to challenge those that we work with, because we're not standing in judgment of them. We're only saying that all of us have these same opportunities and challenges, we want to try to land on the right side of decisions and how we interact with people.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's good stuff, Eric. That's good stuff.
Well, what we wanted to do today were two things: to really look at COVID-19 and sort of look at reflections now that we're starting, the country's starting to open back up, reflections over 2020, 2021, lessons learned, and maybe concerns that still remain. And then we also want to talk about sort of DEI reflections, because those two have kind of been on parallel paths. DEI reflections 2020, 2021 in terms of the good news, and then what are some of the challenges that we see. So let's start with COVID-19 lessons learned. What did you experience in business, Tommy, when the pandemic first hit? What did you see in the world around you? What were you feeling, and what were you experiencing?
So one of the first things that I experienced as a business when COVID hit was that as a professional services provider, we're DE&I consultants, it was actually more easy to transition from the face-to-face interactions to the virtual.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why it was more easy or simpler is because in professional services, much of the work that we do is internal to the people. Right. If it's strategy, if it's reflection, if it's designing plans and things like that, it still can be done literally over a laptop or a desktop or a small group. It's not a widget. It's not a manufactured process where there's a product at the end where the consumer has to then, literally be physically involved with that product, right? And so the initial shock was, personally as a leader, how are we going to sustain? How are we going to make the shift in this change, right? It wasn't a matter of, do we have to change? It was, yes, we do have to change. How do we, right? And then the second thing that happened was in us making that change and shifting from the physical in-person trainings, consulting opportunities, et cetera, to now more virtual, we did not anticipate the rise of stress in people, where a lot of inhibitions, a lot of concerns that individuals had started to bubble up.
That's right. That's right.
And now there was a greater need for our service. And we were a little bit overwhelmed with folks saying, hey, we need help in all levels.
Right.
And then, Eric, I think the third, just on the onset, right, was twofold. The third was legislation. The government had stepped up to the plate, and they were offering up stimulus, right? Paycheck protection plan, for example. And that process was great in idea, but the reality was, from a small business or a medium-sized business, and particularly a minority-owned business, access to those funds were more difficult than what I was hearing and seeing on the news and in life.
Right.
Everybody was getting money except my company.
Right.
Right. And so that third piece was, we've made the shift. There's a greater need, but we don't have the cash flow and the revenue to continue to provide the service to the level that we expect and our clients expect. This was a kind of a catch-22. The demand is high, right? But the cash flow, the capital to provide that service wasn't there. And again, capital to ramp up the technology, right? Even if it was like a Zoom, we couldn't get the free program anymore.
Right.
We had to go to the larger subscription.
Right.
So that was my initial phase, and that initial phase lasted a few months.
Right. I'll tell you, Tommy, it was interesting because we were in this thing and we were hearing about it. Happy New Year. We were hearing about China. And our president was showing us a happy face. All is well. We got 13 cases. This is going to be over in no time. But we were hearing other voices saying, no, a pandemic is coming. Pandemic, what is the pandemic?
Yeah.
And it was like that. And then, Tommy, when that thing ramped up, man, and started toppling people, I just remember, Tommy, feeling this way. This is the only way I can describe it. It felt like we were in a tsunami. And I was literally felt like I was watching businesses blow by me. Just people tumbling like tumbleweeds. And I'm just kind of hunkered down.
Yeah.
And it felt like the bubble that I was in was calm, but it should have been raging.
Yes.
Because my business, when you remember I said, my wife been telling me for the last decade, you got to go virtual. I told her I don't even believe in it.
Yeah.
But you and I, if your business is all about bringing people together, now we're socially and physically distancing people, you're down to 1 or 2 clients. And so I'm literally in this cocoon watching businesses blow by me and watching name brand businesses blow by.
Yes.
Big time restaurants and big name stores and retailers. And you're watching people that are wondering how they're going to work and feed themselves. And you're literally hunkered down like you're in a bunker. And I had resources, and so I had resources, but now I got to figure out how I'm going to take care of my staff. People are beginning to come to me and say, do I need to tender my resignation? No, don't. I'm saying, don't worry about that. Don't think about that. But inside of my head, I'm saying, thank you for the offer.
Yeah.
Got to keep that in my pocket. And then the PPP loans came out. Everybody was getting them. They said, go to your bank. I went there. Nope, we don't have any money. And then all of a sudden, all the legislation, they start putting pressure on these banks to be fair. And because that pressure was put, my bank came back to me and said, oh, Eric, by the way, we approved you. We had approved you on the first tranche.
Yeah.
We got a little money. And so we were able to take care of some things. And then all of a sudden, Tommy, our entire business shifted. As you and I know, we pivoted, to 100% virtual. And then after George Floyd's death, I think everything got on steroids. And you and I really were out here. It was like you were catching bodies that were falling from the sky. And so, but there's a lot that we experienced. What were some of the lessons that you felt like you learned over the last year and a half?
Oh, good question. Lessons learned, Eric. A number of lessons, but one I learned personally, Eric. I have been developed to weather such storms.
Come on now.
Yep, I've been developed that way. If I look back at my development history from my parents and what they instilled in me.
Come on now. Built for storms. From my parents introducing me to Inroads, which was another incubator of developing skill sets, weather for storms, to that internship, and then to my struggles in college and not really graduating on time, if you will. Right.
Where Eric, other friends of mine were graduating and falling past me.
Right.
In the other direction. The whole world was moving, and I was stuck in a place like, why can't I graduate? Why is it taking me so long? I'm working my hardest. I was being groomed to be still and learn the lessons that are being taught to me in the moment. During the COVID pandemic, early on and even now, my number one lesson was that God has always been with me. Eric, he allowed me to be the leader of my organization. He allowed me to lead people and give them confidence, even though I was scared.
Right.
He allowed me to be strategic when the tornadoes and the tsunamis were coming fast and furious.
That's right.
Another thing that he taught me, and I learned during the pandemic, the early phases, was something I learned from you back in Inroads and even prior to that. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. Eric, I have prepared my company for a 3-month or a 6-month complete shutdown of business.
Right.
And when that happened, it actually happened. 95% of my business was gone.
Right.
That first March and April.
That's
95%. Right. Like you, I had some resources. You know, I needed some additional resources to tap into the PPP. But I was okay to give confidence to my staff.
That's right. While
still building my own infrastructure to be prosperous and contributing at a value statement to my customers and community.
Right.
And then lastly, Eric, what I did learn, sometimes it's a cliche, but I believe it. This too shall pass. I learned in the midst of the storm.
That's right.
To stay on my rock and stay anchored personally, professionally, physically. Keep staying on my rocks. To don't lose faith and slip into any other negative vices.
That's right.
Don't slip into drugs or alcohol or just overt profanity, just cursing everything because those curses will come back. And I learned to steadfast, right? Count on people like Eric Ellis that I can lean on.
Come on now, baby.
That I can call on to go to and hit some golf clubs and hit some golf balls. And it wasn't about golf.
Right.
It was about me saying, what the hell is going on? And Eric was saying, Tommy, what the hell is going on? And we said, enough of all that cussing and fussing. What are we going to do about it? Right. My circle of trust shrank. And all those naysayers started to fall off like trees in the fall, and those leaves were shedding.
That's
what I love.
Yep. Tommy, I love that. Love it, love it, love it. Now you talking real talk, because here's what we're here to say to you all this morning, that no matter what life looks like, no matter what life is throwing at you, you have to be built to last. You have to know on whom your foundation is built. And that's not just built on you. You have to understand that you're not alone. And you have to take the cumulative effect of all the storms you've ever seen to have the faith to understand this too, Tommy Lewis, will pass. I watched my father all my life, Tommy. You know what my father used to say? My ship's about to come in. It never really came in while he was alive. But he said, my ship is about to come in. But as I look over the course of my life with my father, all I remember is mostly good days, even when the lights were out. even when his business wasn't making enough money for him to buy a winter coat for my sister. And he cried about that. Even when he had to borrow my little money that I was making from Scoreboard Restaurant, and he was a business owner. I bringing home my little $150, you know, $200, you know, $63, whatever it was. I bring it home. And Tommy, I was so proud to give that to the family. My daddy needs me. I can be helpful. And I gave him my little money. He said, Eric, keep track of the money that you give me. And I had a little thing on the refrigerator. You know, I put a little, and I just saw my little money. He said, I'm gonna give it back to you. And sure enough, he gave me that money back. And Tommy, after he died, I saw his business going to make millions and millions of dollars. And so I knew that the dream that he had, my ship is going to come in, was true. It was true before he died in terms of his ship of love. The fruit for what he had invested in his children was blossoming. Those are ships that were coming in. Yes. And I think the other thing that we have to be aware of, Tommy, is that, you know, not everything that we do and not everything that we're about in life is tied to finances and materialism. There has to be joy that exists beyond that. And so as I think about some of the gifts that we got out of COVID-19, Tommy, it was the family being able to hunker. My son just said yesterday, he said that was the most I've ever seen, you know, our family, and especially dad, you know, in my life. That last year and a half.
Wow.
And we played ball, man. We made music. We sang together. We enjoyed each other's company. We cared deeply about each other. We told each other that we did. We got a chance to just be up on each other, but not in a negative way, man. And I tell you, that's a powerful thing. And then for them to see resilience, and for them to see, I'm gonna say it like this, Tommy, the mighty hand of God.
Yes.
My brother Wendell's here in Atlanta as well. He said, did you hear me sing at the graduation, scream out the national anthem? He said, I'm so proud to be an American. He said, the things that we got and received, Tommy, from the country, from this nation, you know, the money that was sent to people, that's not happening everywhere in the world, man. The vaccines that we've got, man, all of this, we're in a great place right now. And he said, Eric, he said, I've seen the impact that the pandemic has had on you and all your kids. Jillian took the opportunity to go back to graduate school and get her master's degree. Now she's working for Clorox. Judy got a job in England. I mean, come on now.
Come on.
God's mighty hand is moving, and the lesson is this. Don't allow anything to distract you or discourage you or make you believe that what you have is not enough. All you need is what you have in these hands, what you have in this head, and what you have in the God that you serve. And I'll tell you, Tommy, it's a beautiful thing to understand that you do have some relationships that matter. Some people that are willing to be there, man.
Yes.
So you and I know we had that with each other.
Yep.
I love that we've been able to, you know, chop it up, iron sharpening iron. Man, there was every opportunity to go into a hole somewhere, just to crawl into a hole and not come out.
And not come out. Not come out at all.
I was getting up every day, man, to go to the office because I know that's what I needed to do.
Yep.
And I told my staff, you can do what you want to do. You can work at home, here, whatever you want to do. But I had to get up and go to work as though something was there until something was there. And that's what we have to do. People, understand this. Pull your ripcord and get after life. First of all, you have to understand what your purpose is in life. And that's the thing, Tommy, I do understand why I'm on earth.
Yes.
My job is to reconcile people one to another and ultimately to try to reconcile them to God. And so whether you pay me or not, you and I were doing this whether people were here or not.
Oh, yeah.
That's who we are. And once you understand your purpose, then resources will follow that. Do the things that are right, the things that you were born to do, and money and sort of provision will follow that.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. And some may say, Eric, that, yeah, Eric, what you just said, I agree, but it's easier said than done.
It is.
That's what some people would say.
Right.
I would say that they're right to a degree. It's easier said than done when you're trying to start it and start that machine of faith.
Uh-huh.
It is easier done than said when the things are starting to happen and you just give it up. Hey, take me where you need me to be.
Say that again, Tommy.
Yep.
Take
me where you need me to be. As soon as the trouble, the tsunami, the tornado is beginning to happen, right? Like, all right, Eric, here we go. See, in the Midwest and some other parts of the country, we get a lot of tornadoes.
Right.
In other parts of the country, based on, if they're close to water, they may get tsunamis.
Right.
In our part of the country, we get tornadoes, and we've gotten so many tornadoes over the decades,
right,
that now you don't have to watch the news.
Right.
You can look up in the sky and say, that's a storm coming.
Right.
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 And that's not just a regular storm, Eric. That's a tornado.
Right.
Right. It simply hasn't touched down yet.
Right.
You do not wait for a tornado to touch down, right, before going to shelter or getting out of the way.
Right.
In fact, a tornado will give you warnings like hail, sleet, high winds. Right, Eric?
Come on now.
So it's easier done than said. When the storm is coming, it's easier to do what you need to do than to say, I think a storm is coming.
Right.
No.
Right.
So when you see the storm, start to move in the right position. Start to get into safety. Start to hunker down. Right. Start to get your ducks in a row. Get your family or your coworkers or your business in order. Get your business in order, and then say, all right, what's the next step?
Right.
The first step is already taken care of.
Right.
What's the next step? And then after that, the next step, the storm passes, and then there's some recovery. There may be some damages, some loss. We mourn things like things are not the same. Right. Eric, things are not the same. So I want to close my comments there because some people miss that. When there's loss is not only the death of someone. Right. Loss is sometimes loss in direction, loss in control, the loss of what used to be is no longer, the loss of one's self-identity or even the organizational identity. And oftentimes, people and organizations don't give time for us to mourn the loss. What's going to happen this year, the remainder of 2021 and going into 2022, is that people are going to reflect, as we are, on 2020 and the first part of 2021. But are we giving people the opportunity to mourn, to reflect in mourning of, man, my life was this then, or my business was this then, and then come out of that mourning to a brighter day to say, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, God, for allowing me to get through that. I mourned, but I'm still here. I'm still surviving. I'm still able to have this conversation on this Saturday that I'm continuing to come back to. Right. Let's not lose faith that we are here still for a reason. Right. Are we going to do good things with those lessons learned? Right. Those are my
Tommy. Love it, Tommy. And I'll tell you, so there's a verse that talks about when you've done all you can do, stand.
Ooh.
And so that's what we have to do, Tommy. We have to do all that we can do. And then the faith part says, okay, stand. You've done everything else that you can do. Mourning. My brother died in 2020. And so I'm still probably mourning that. And you know, the way the world is, Tommy, we're supposed to get over things. You're just supposed to get over them, you know. Yeah. And so, you know, you move on, but every other day or so, something will happen, and I'll think, oh man, I wish I could call my older brother, but he's not there. But I'm here in Atlanta because of his seed is here. And when I look at his son, who he had during his marriage to someone else, and this was seen as to some maybe even an abomination, to others certainly a mistake, but to us now, it is beautiful joy.
Yes.
My wife, she just married to me. That was her brother-in-law. She's fallen in love with his son. And so his son, who was born out of shame, has now been sort of adopted into a whole new family. All of my kids are here because they love their cousin. And when he was in the shadow, when my brother was alive, now he's come completely out of those shadows. And we've been able to hug him and love him. And you know who he looks exactly like? My brother.
Yeah.
And so, Tommy, there are gifts that we get out of these storms. And although we mourn, it's important for us to see the silver lining. And so, Tommy, as you think about silver linings out of COVID-19, what are some of those?
Well, three things real quick, Eric. First, we never have ever experienced such success in the history of Make It Plain Consulting. Ever. Right?
Right.
We were the hot topic. We were the go-to.
Right.
We received so much business and opportunity that we were referring opportunities to other folks.
Right.
Right. And the reason why we were, because we didn't have the capacity, one, and we wanted to care for the need.
Right.
So that's one. We had tremendous business growth. And in that business growth, I would tell you, some of which was monetarily, right? And it cared for a lot of expenses. So there are points where we were breaking even still, where we had been in the red for years and years and years.
Right, right.
The other silver lining is I too got closer to my family. We were physically in our home, close proximity. We were having more direct conversation when we were out in public, talking through our mask. So you had to really face the person you're talking to. You couldn't be looking at a cell phone and mumbling through your mask. Otherwise, you wouldn't be heard. And so it created this direct communication of one, energy, the love for one another. I'm present in our time together.
That's right.
The verbal communication, I'm going to articulate how I feel. Happiness, giddiness, to even sadness and maybe depression. The gamut of emotions.
That's right.
The third silver lining was that I learned much more about myself, Eric. I learned much more about myself. I gave up some things that I thought that I had to have in my life. And I realized that I don't have to have them. They were once.
That's right.
They were once. And there were some things that were very important to me that I no longer took for granted. Some of it was my family. Some of it was relationships with certain friends, right? That I was intentional about reaching out to and texting and calling, emailing. And then even in that same vein of learning myself, silver lining is that I did not know that I would go back to school in not the school of higher learning, but the school of hard knocks. I went back to the school of hard knocks, and that school was tough. It was test after test after test, right. And I learned I'm ready for the test.
Right.
Right. Some of the tests I didn't do too well.
Right.
Some of them got an A.
Right.
And as soon as I got an A on those tests, I was calling Eric Ellis. I was calling my wife. I was calling my sister. I was calling myself. Like, hey, I got an A. Hey, I got an A. Right. What about that other test? We're not going to talk about the other test.
Right.
This test, I got an A. Right. I was celebrating the successes.
Right. I love that, Tommy, and I would concur with everything. Certainly in the last year, we've gotten more business than we've ever gotten in the history of our business as well. And I'll tell you, Tommy, it's, when things are so dramatic in the world around you, it lets you know that there is a storm raging and lives are being taken. And we were literally watching on TV while they were keeping body bag counts.
Yeah.
They were just announcing to us how many people have died now and how many people have died now. Yeah. And we were literally scared to death in terms of what was happening in the world around us. And to know that God was with us and that ordering our steps in terms of how we survived through it. My son said yesterday, because, siblings sometimes have little things with each other. And so sometimes they'll have little issues. And my youngest son said, Daddy, I don't know how you do it. He said, I might have bailed on all of this responsibility if I had a wife, 4 children, on all of this on my back. And I said to him, I said, son, this is what I wanted since I was a kid. And I said, I'm not disappointed in any way. Everything about you all, I love and I'm grateful for. Every difficulty you have, every joy you experience. I see the best in you all, and I hope for the best for you all. But I love you to death, and I count it an honor to be able to do that, to be able to be dependent upon, Tommy. I count that as an honor, man, and that is a great, great joy. And I also learned to try to give more grace and love to others because it calmed me, Tommy. Yes. In other words, when you're wrestling life yourself, sometimes if you just try to fight hard back because life is punching you hard, it doesn't work. Yeah. Sometimes you have to just absorb things and you just have to settle yourself and you have to deliver back a response of love, encouragement, joy, and kindness. And then when the stress and frustration is on you and you aren't able to do that, sometimes you got to get away.
Yes.
Just stop talking to people. Hold up, zip it. Get up, bro. Don't talk no more. Yeah. My grandmother used to say, if you ain't got nothing good to say, don't say nothing at all. Yeah. And so sometimes I've had to creep up the steps and just, put myself away. Yeah. And I've had to learn how to apologize, Tommy. I think it's so important, man, to model that. You cannot be an effective leader without learning how to say, I'm sorry. Tommy, has that gotten any easier for you?
It's not gotten easier to get to the point of apology.
Right.
But after the apology, everything has gotten easier.
Right.
And I haven't learned the lesson that once I apologize, things get easier. So why don't I apologize? Right? Because I'm a knucklehead.
Quickly. Get it done quickly.
Yeah. Eric, apologies.
Apologize. So let's look at DEI, and I just want to kind of get here just a little bit. Well, no, I said, let's see if there's anything else on concerns that remain. How long will vaccinations protection last? I think that's a concern. What about the variants? What is the lasting impact of the stress and anxiety that we've experienced? Any thoughts about any of those?
Yeah, just real quickly here. I'm fully vaccinated. And I have a number of different vaccinations too, because of traveling the world and all that good stuff. And some of those vaccinations that I have from the past, Eric, were vaccinations that were pandemics. They were the results of pandemics. Smallpox, right? Cholera, right? Tuberculosis, right? I have all of those vaccinations.
Right.
I did not live in a time of those pandemics.
Right.
When 40%, 50%, 60% of particular demographics were, painfully, extinguished from this earth because of that spread of the pandemic. So with that being said, I am fully vaccinated with this current, the result of this current pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the decisions I made to be vaccinated was the historical biography. I've had other vaccinations.
Right.
I know that I trust those scientists and experts who have worked 20, 30, 40, and 50 years on the vaccination that I have now, and it wasn't overnight.
Right.
I know that technology is better. I have a cell phone. 30 years ago, there was no such thing as a cell phone.
Right.
I have a car that's windows you don't have to manually wind down.
Right.
30 years ago, that didn't exist.
Right.
So coming back to this moment now, the vaccines, vaccines are not indefinite as far as their lifespan in the human body.
Right.
Some of them last 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. Most do not last more than 10 years. And as I mentioned, I've had a lot of vaccinations.
Right.
And in the cases you have to get booster shots.
Right.
I'm looking forward to the day when we in this country are not selfish about things we don't really know about.
Right. Wow.
In other words, the day when people say, I know what I know, and that's the most important thing.
Right.
That is selfish, that you know what you know. But there is so much more knowledge and information that we are clueless about,
Right.
where other people know more about that little piece than others.
Right.
Mao Zedong said that a smattering of information and knowledge is a dangerous thing. That's what he said.
That's where we are. Right.
A little bit of knowledge, Eric, is a dangerous thing.
Right.
That's where we are. This vaccination, right? We had a lot of people had a little bit of knowledge. I took a little bit of a deeper dive and gained some more knowledge from other people, like medical practitioners, first responders, right? Teachers and educators. And I said, yep, I'm weighing my risks, and I'm going to take a calculated decision and be vaccinated. Will I have to have a booster shot later on? Yes. Just like influenza.
Right.
And for those who are less familiar with influenza, it's the flu. When you look at your paperwork, when you get the test, your flu test, and it says influenza, because I was the same person. What is influenza? Right? It's the flu.
Right.
Right? There's so much that we don't know. But what I do know is that I am fully vaccinated, and I look forward to the day that we can remove our masks, become more closely integrated and socialized, and be safe, protecting ourselves and each other.
Right. And I would agree with you on all that. I'm fully vaccinated as well and delighted to be there. I would say another question that I have is, are our businesses transformed forever? Because you and I saw 100% pivot from in-person to virtual. Tommy, what's your sense about how much of that is going to remain? Are we going to sort of return back to traditional ways of doing coaching, consulting, training? What's your sense?
I think that we will return back in the next 3 to 5 years. We will return back to face-to-face, one-to-one, in person, with another access point, Eric. So now we will leverage technology as an advantage.
Right.
So in other words, people will still talk with one another. They just use the telephone.
Right.
People will still meet with one another. They just use the telephone or conference bridges. And so as we move into the next year and two, we will slowly start to move back to 40% in person, 60% in person, 80%. We may not move back to fully in person, because now we're learning that the virtual platforms and technology is indeed reducing time, right? The time to actually deliver the service. It's increasing the time because we're filling our calendars every hour on the hour, right? But also it's allowing us to be able to touch more people at the same time. So I think that in 3 to 5 years, we will be 80 to 90% in person, in brick and mortar. There's going to be a push from these large businesses that have these buildings with rent, utilities, etc. Employees, come back. We need you in the building. And again, there's going to be a percentage of folks never coming back. No worries, we can still work with you.
That's right. And I see it probably similarly, but it feels also like, especially for global companies, that virtual has put everybody on common footing. And so there's more equity that happens there because there's not sort of a corporate headquarters where everybody's meeting there and I'm the one person in China or Japan. So we're seeing that there's more even footing there. I think that that's a good thing. I think that you're right about the saving of time. People are grateful for that. Now that they've gotten comfortable with this, this seems to have taken the place of conference calls. So I don't think that we're going to be doing as much of the audio only when we can sort of meet face to face this way. Let's look at sort of DEI and sort of the 2020, 2021. We've talked about it a little bit. What's the good news? What have companies done that is genuinely positive? I'll start here a couple things and then get your reaction. I think certainly we've seen a greater involvement in terms of CEOs and executives. I believe that people being sheltered in place and having to watch the traumatic murder of George Floyd traumatize people throughout this country and around the world. And I think it was this huge wake-up call, Tommy, that is just inhumane. And if that is happening at all, and people are telling me that they're not surprised, like this is not the first time, I've been hearing them, but now I'm seeing it. And so I think that there was an initial sort of rush to equity that says that we have to demand that of ourselves. And I think it's the leadership part in CEOs that said, my power says that we can eliminate that kind of thing. And so I think they sort of rushed out at it as though CEO through edict, I can eliminate that. And I think that they were willing to invest some time, some resources. We saw them try to get their employees engaged. And so they were spinning around. It's like, what do we do? A lot of action, a lot of bodies moving, people looking around. And so they got councils and listening sessions and they, let's get this fixed. So there's some positives around the energy and the willingness to invest their own time in DEI. So I think that some of that is some real good news, and that it's gotten on the radar. People were now willing to talk about racism, and so that's been out of style for the last decade. So I think that, that sort of got back on the table. So those are some of the things that I thought, and CEOs are coming with an interest towards, at least through language, systemic change.
Yeah. Eric, I would agree absolutely what you're sharing. I would also add that with the identification and appointments of chief diversity officers, calling out the need to have a dedicated person or a committee responsible for driving DE&I within the organization, I thought was a good step. It's nothing new for older companies who have been committed to this for some time. The caveat is, however, that sometimes our chief diversity officers are still not part of the C-suite.
Right.
So it's still the chief executive officer, chief financial officer, chief human resources officer, and then the chief diversity officer is basically a senior manager or a director.
Right.
The other thing that it came out, what's happening right now with DE&I is that years ago, there was a saying that, diversity is not just the right thing to do, it's the business thing to do.
Right.
And many people thought that was great corporate speak.
Right.
It was great language, but there were no teeth in that.
Right.
Now what we're seeing, because of the social unrest, not only with the late brother George Floyd and others, but also with the global pandemic, it's created a movement around a strategy development. Right. So in other words, in companies, what is our strategy with measurements, right? In goals,
right?
And in society, what's our strategy to care for these ills and inequities?
Right.
So those are some of the good things that's come out in the DE&I. I think that there's going to be in the future, the near future, Eric, there's going to be some other add-on languages or add-on terms or letters at the end of DE&I.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say that in many ways, people like you and I, for the last quarter century, have oftentimes been like town criers.
Yep.
DEI, diversity, respect, value one another, town criers. And we oftentimes thought that the crying was falling upon deaf ears.
Yeah.
But the millennials were listening, and others. And so now what we're seeing is there's some learning that has taken place.
Yeah.
And so this is as big a move as affirmative action was in the 70s. I see this as a shift like that. But it's like, no, we saw that record before. We saw that movie before.
Yeah.
We didn't have enough teeth. We didn't have this. So now things like transparency, accountability, budget, cultural and systemic change, and not just events and activities. Now we're seeing people begin to ask for that. And so there's less places to hide. People are not being faked out by the ERGs, employee resource groups alone, the affinity groups, the listening session by itself, the Black History Month celebration and the Women's Month. They're not thrown off by any of those things. They're asking now deeper questions that reflect a deeper understanding of these conversations that you and I have been navigating for a long time. I think that transparency is a big one. because on the downside, there is some pushback against quotas.
Yeah.
And it seems like people want to fight that same old battle of how do we diversify without counting? And so I'll tell you, Tommy, so we saw affirmative action.
Yep.
Then we saw quotas because we said, look, you got to give people some metrics or they won't ever. And the reason why they came up with quotas, because every time the government came back and said, how are you doing? Well, we're doing. We're looking for them.
Yep.
We're interviewing some. We've gone some places. We've tried some things. No change. So people say, you know what? I ain't going to keep asking you.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. So when they came along and started holding people's feet to the fire with quotas, there were a number of different responses. Some people said, okay, you got me. We're going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Other people say, I don't like you.
Yeah.
You're going to make me hire in some Latinx people, some African Americans. Well, I'm just going to put anybody on the job. They don't even have a degree. Just throw them into jobs so that they can fail, so I can say, look, I told you so.
Yeah.
Or I might tell white guys, look, I would have promoted you, but he made me promote a woman. Or so that was horrible. You can see how there's backlash from that. But then, so as a result of that, they got the new bias against quotas, and they called that the new racism.
Yeah.
And so then we got thrown off the boat again. And then the university stopped, just sort of doing, numbers of people that, your African ancestry didn't give you any extra points to compensate for the systemic racism that has kept you out, or sexism, or ageism, or anything else. But now we're back, man, understanding that to some extent, if we don't hold ourselves accountable with something, we won't account. And the marketplace is now the one that's holding organizations accountable. It's not government, it's the marketplace. And I told them that the marketplace is determined, the jig is up.
Yeah.
We've already determined if you don't have diversity, it's because you're biased.
Yeah.
We don't need to do any studies. We don't need the consultants to do anything. We've already judged you as biased. Now, you could say that's unfair all day long. But Tommy, I've got some organizations that I've been working with that 70% of their workforce are people of color. Over 90% of their clients are people of color, and they have no people of color in their executive leadership team or their board.
Mm. Yeah.
So that's why people are saying you can't tell me there's a justification for that.
Yeah.
So that's some of the good news. What do you see as we look down this last 10 or 15 minutes? What do you see, Tommy, as some of the challenges, or is there other good news that you want to share, and then we'll go to challenges?
There is some other good news, and you spoke to it a little bit, Eric, with the millennials or the next generation.
Ooh.
That is the good news.
Right.
Again, as we look at our workforce, especially on the heels of ramping down the pandemic, right? We're not through it yet. What we've learned is that we still have upwards of 5 generations in the workplace. And so some of us who are 70 years old, it is not uncommon to be working in an environment with 18-year-olds.
Right.
That is a vast age and generational difference.
Right.
Being 70 and being 18. That can be grandchildren, if not great-grandchildren in some instances.
Right.
So what does that look like? It looks like that we have to leverage diversity, which is the uniqueness of people.
Right.
We have to practice inclusion. These are good things. We have to start to practice how are these multiple generations working in the environment. We have to have some cross-pollination of lived experiences. So our seasoned folks, our baby boomers or veterans who are 55 years of age to 70 and 75 years of age, they have knowledge.
Right.
The good news is that literally we cannot afford for that intellectual property to just leave the room like Elvis.
Right.
Just leave the building.
Right.
And at the same time, our 18, 20, 25, and 30-year-olds have been born and raised in an entirely different cultural mindset.
Right.
They simply view the world differently.
Right.
The good news is that we have to tap into that innovation, creativity,
right,
that diversity of thought, true diversity of thought,
right,
as well as that thought of equity.
Right.
And now we can't clump everyone in the same generation with the same thoughts, and we're not going to do that. But the good news is that our tide is rising still.
Right.
Our boats are rising still. There is great optimism at the end of the tunnel, at the top of the mountain.
I love that.
Because our next generation is saying, as they're saying, we're not going to tolerate racism. We're not going to tolerate discrimination. We're not going to tolerate inequity. We're going to tell you in the boardroom. We're going to tell you in the workforce. We're going to tell you on the playground, in the school building, in the church. They're talking it.
Right.
Where is diversity? Where is equity? Where's inclusion? Generation next. Thank you.
Right. And I'll tell you, Tommy, and it's not celebrated enough. And the media, we can't depend on them to celebrate it for us because they're still trying to garner everybody's attention through the negative. But I'll tell you, Tommy, one of the things that ties these two topics together is that during COVID-19, in the midst of that, we saw some of the greatest protests that this nation has ever seen. And Tommy, I don't know about you, man, but I wept many times when I saw video of little all-white towns, little white boys and girls carrying around signs that say Black Lives Matter. Right now, Tommy, what we're seeing is that in some of the organizations I've worked with, if they happen to hire a new class of employees, and that class happens to be all white, they will get major pushback around diversity from that class. Mm-hmm. Like you can't assume that if you don't have people of color that you won't have concerns about a lack of diversity. You get that from millennials and others. And so I think that the tide is shifting. 2 weeks ago, I had a couple on here from that were farmers, Tommy, husband and wife team, that were talking about their love of diversity and some of the debates and challenges they have within their family, fighting for equity and fighting for understanding. Hearing a white male say, when I grew up, he said, I saw my family talk about other people all the time. Now, he wasn't trying to discount the valuable experiences that he had with his family, but he said, I also saw them talk about the Polish. Yeah. And then they would talk about the Mexicans. He says, and they would talk about the Mexicans as being lazy. He said, but then I would look over here and see all this amazing work that they would do. And he was like, that doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Of course, what you're telling me is not matching up with what I'm seeing. And so I'd say, Tommy, that there really is some good news that we're getting ready to get to a place where it's undeniable across this country that inclusion of all of us is the better way.
Yeah, the inclusion of all of us is the better way. Those are some of the good things I'm thinking of, Eric. This is good stuff. Good stuff.
Let me go, and we want to thank those of you that have joined us today. Kendall's book is out now. I told Kendall, send me my 5 books, and an invoice. I'll pay for them. I'm good for it.
Yes.
And, Dr. Reggie Crane is with us from the Air Force, one of our clients. Love him. Judy Brooke, thank you all. Dan, appreciate you joining us on a weekly basis. As we just, in these last few minutes, we'll come back to this maybe next week, Tommy, but as we look at some of the challenges around DEI, with everybody sort of rushing to the table, what are you seeing as some of the challenges that you're seeing clients face that give us some pause or concern?
Yeah, I do see the challenge of, sincerely, Eric, I do see the challenge of the expertise in those who have been appointed certain positions, and not just at the chief diversity officer or the manager position, but also when the creation of employee resource groups.
Yeah.
In the person or the people who are leading that, I see a challenge in the skill set and competence of creating sustainable organizations that bring value to the organization. Mm-hmm. Not just value to the people who are part of the employee resource group, but value to the organization.
Right.
I see a challenge in sustaining the movement of DE&I within certain organizations that have been historically biased and historically discriminatory.
Right.
In other words, this rise in attention about diversity, equity, and inclusion is sometimes directed by either other companies and their peers saying, you too need to do this, or is directed by brand. The company is trying to protect their brand of being a inclusive and equitable organization. And so they're saying, yes, we do have this as top of our mind. We're going to release a statement. We're going to put a couple of words on the website. We'll have some forums. Are you okay now? And then they go away.
Right.
That's a challenge because the people who are oppressed and hushed in their own organization, they will not have the strength and stick-to-itiveness to continue this struggle over the next 5, 10, or 15, or 20 years because they've been doing it for 30 years already. That's a challenge. It's called burnout.
Right.
And then the last challenge among many challenges, Eric, that I see is the co-opting of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Oh, my goodness.
I see that people are putting other language in the bill, right?
Right.
So when we're trying to pass a bill, and it's 780 pages.
Right.
Yeah, I don't have time to read all of those, but wait a minute, I read that page. That has nothing to do with DE&I.
Right.
Right? It's co-opting the bill. I think it's a challenge, Eric, where people and organizations are throwing other language into the mix, that they want to minimize some of the burning issues within D&I. I'll tell you right now that race, gender inequality, discrimination, and bias across the board, bias in promotions, bias in hiring, bias in even doing business with other partners and clients, it still exists.
Right.
The executive C-suite still is my majority white male. It's still a country club. And because of this, there may be some co-opting of, well, let's not talk about race as much. Let's talk about diversity of thought.
Right.
And our diversity of thought is basically the same because we all are part of the same country club. That's a challenge.
Right. And so there will still be a need for us to continue to move forward with our work, Tommy. We are grateful for those clients that we work with that are genuinely and legitimately interested in making real change. And we're seeing some of that. But there are others that are seeking to co-opt these efforts, are not really super committed to the change that's necessary. But I think at the end of the day, Tommy, you'll be found out. In other words, if you don't commit to this for the right reasons, it's not sustainable. And so I think that we have to find ourselves working more enthusiastically with those who get it. And those who do get it will see the benefit of that, Tommy. That's the thing that I would say, is that we're going to see that. And so I want to thank you. Sounds like I have 5 people talking on my side here. I want to thank you all for joining us again. I was off location, having some challenges, but we made it through. And we thank you for joining us for another of these weekly conversations in diversity. Tom, any final words?
Final words. I want to thank your family, Eric. I know that being on the road and carving out an hour and a half on a Saturday morning, it disrupts a lot of things, and people want to go and enjoy the sun, enjoy the city and the events. Thank you to the Ellises for allowing your husband, your father, to join us in this conversation. So thank you.
Tommy, I love you, man. I miss you. And I was glad that we were able to have this wonderful conversation. And thank those of you in the community that joined us. We'll see you next week for another of our weekly installments in Diversity Conversations.
Take care.
Take care.